Hello and welcome to our review for the 900 Global Eternity. Quick note before we get started, if you like our jerseys, code Rosdahl10 gets you 10% off at checkout at CoolWick.com. Head on over to browse the website, then like the video, drop down in the comments, and let me know what your favorite jersey design is. I'm going to pick a winner and give a couple jerseys away on release date for the Eternity and TNT, which is February 17th. My personal favorite right meow is Space Cat. Starting with the tech, the Eternity features the S84 Response Pearl cover stock from the Altered Reality. They even noted that they kept the color scheme somewhat similar for familiarity. It comes with the React-to-Gloss factory surface, but Angel's taken a liking to React-to-Scuff, so we now take all of our balls down to 1,000 on a resurfacing machine and then finish them with React-to-Scuff on a spinner, and that gets it to about a 3,000-ish grit sheen. Resetting the factory surface is something that we recommend in general. Box surface is more like guidelines than actual rules. Changing it yourself allows you to know exactly where it's at. Plus, you can't replicate factory surface, but you can always get it back to where you had it before if you adjust it. In addition, it alleviates any out-of-the-box issues or inconsistencies. We've had a few too many of those lately, but it's actually a common thing for people to do in the first place. It helps break the ball in a little bit quicker and get that factory edge off, so to speak. This goes for any ball from any company. If you don't like it out of the box, don't be afraid to change the surface, because that's a big part of personalizing it for your game and what you bowl on. Anyway, moving on, the new Epoch core has been modified from the popular brake core to lower the intermediate differential a little. This prevents the core from burning energy too quickly or locking up. The numbers are a 249 RG, 050 differential, and an 014 split or intermediate differential. If you saw my absolute versus reality check video, this is a concept that I talked about for an Eternity in that video. So if you haven't seen it, you might check it out, but it is really noticeable with the Eternity. I definitely agree that it's a much rounder and more continuous shape than typical big block ASIMs. They also noted that the Epoch core is earlier and more aggressive than the Disturbance core from the Reality series, but I really don't agree with that at all. The Eternity is definitely easier down the lane, even with the surface reset, and I know that earlier rolling doesn't always translate to earlier hooking, but it doesn't really seem to roll earlier either. We also have it smoother and more continuous than the Altered. The Reality series in general is strong, fast revving, and really aggressive. The Eternity feels like a tamer, more controllable, and more user-friendly version of a Reality line ball. Our test pattern, as always, is Kegel Chromium. It's a challenge pattern at just under a 7-to-1 ratio. Keeps you honest, but isn't too punishing. 42 feet and 25.5 mils, so long end of medium length and high end of medium volume. And we're bowling at Royal Crest Lanes in Lawrence, Kansas, who always take amazing care of us, so if you're in the area, stop and check it out. We're also going to switch things up a little. Instead of moving from zone to zone throughout, we're now just going to take what the lane, the ball, and our games are giving us, because quite often it feels like we've been trying to force something. The idea, of course, is to test the ball out and see what it looks like in different places on the lane, but that presents several issues. Some balls are better on the fresh, some balls are better in transition, some are better from straighter angles, deeper angles, etc. And while we each try to show you what the ball could look like for you if you're a straighter bowler or cover more boards, it pretty often results in us being in the wrong place on the lane and or the wrong stage of transition for that particular ball, in addition to maybe being in a place that we're not comfortable playing in the first place. This also makes everything kind of run together because, of course, James can force a hype solid to work from fourth arrow on the fresh, but at the same time, it's kind of ridiculous because he's putting in a lot of work to make that happen. That doesn't accurately show where he should be playing, what the ball actually does, or where it fits. It also really screws with our mechanics, to be honest. So from now on, we'll still be moving around somewhat to test the ball's limits, obviously, but we're not going to try to force the ball to be something it's not or force ourselves to be something we're not. This should result in a truer read on the ball and how it compares to other balls anyway. Okay, enough rambling. Let's hit the lane and see what this thing does. This is where Angel normally starts on the lane, just a soft little swing. It's definitely reminiscent of the altered reality out of the gate, but it does noticeably blend the back end a little more. You can see it revving up, you can see that general familiar asymmetric look, so to speak. It's definitely quite clean. There's nothing early about it from a traction or rolling and revving perspective. After the first couple shots, she moved a couple boards in to slow the back end shape a little, and obviously had to clear that dead wood too. That was completely intentional. The Eternity definitely blends wet and dry well. It stays stable and doesn't jerk on the friction. It is a slightly forward shape, but I don't see this as burning up or locking up. On the next few shots, she moved back to where she started from, but she brought her target in a little. The move left was obviously a little bit too much angle, so she thought that she might have just been getting it out a little too far from where she started. So this was the adjustment, and it worked. It's a strong but smooth and controllable ball reaction. The next couple shots, she got them back further out to the right again, but she slowed her speed down, and that also worked. Plus, it gave her a little bit of room on the outside to work with. Now, on the last shot, she got her speed back up, and it went a little too long. It's looking like slower speeds and or heavier hands are going to do really well with this one. On the last few shots, the lane started to settle in a little bit, and it just made the ball reaction look better. A little more friction to work with, meow, more stable, more forgiving. It's just a very readable, predictable, and user-friendly look. It satisfies all the things that most bowlers look for, and while I wouldn't go quite so far as to call it special, it looks like a reaction that's going to be heavy use for a lot of people. So from the first look here, it seems to be fairly tame for a strong cover ASIM, but that's great. I've heard several people say that it's a more usable altered reality, and I think that's what we're seeing here. As she made some adjustments and the lane started to settle down, the ball got less forward and more continuous, so I'm on the fence a little about the shape. I do still think it's a slightly forward roll, but not as forward as the reality, and definitely more controllable. Angel unfortunately doesn't have her altered anymore, but we do have some old house shot footage, so we also got some house shot footage with the Eternity. The altered came at the old 1500 grit polish, but with some games and lane shine on the Eternity meow, we should be close enough on the surface. Here's a short warm-up with the Eternity on the house shot, and then we'll get into the comparison. As you can see, it's not a whole lot different than on chromium. She's got a little bit more friction and a little bit more room to work with. It's really just sharper on the back end, so she can kind of bump the friction to the right and just let it walk up. She does match up really well to it. She had a monster set in league the other night with it. She very nearly shot her first 800. Now we'll take a short look at the altered to get up to speed with it. Now, Angel had gotten a little spinny at the time that we shot this, so apologies, but it's all we have to work with. You can definitely see the similarities regardless. They have very similar ball rolls. The altered was fairly long and sharp, but the cover strength also made it very stable and predictable as well. That's why it was so popular. It was a rare strong ball that blended the lane but offered an angular shape at the same time. Into the comparison, the altered is definitely earlier and sharper, but it's hard to see if it's more forward or not because of the way she's throwing it. However, I can tell you that based on our experience throwing it and seeing it firsthand, the altered is definitely a more forward shape than the Eternity. Angel generally liked it, but the overall strength quite often forced her deeper on the lane, and then the ball would want to get a little too forward for her. After a few more shots, the altered is definitely a little stronger, a little more angular, and definitely more forward. But realistically, if you want an altered reality replacement, the Eternity is it. In addition, the Eternity is virtually a volatility torque clone on paper. It's got the same cover and the same core numbers. Neither of us got to throw a torque, unfortunately, so we can't comment on the comparison, but I'm sure that some other reviews out there will cover it. A couple more for good measure, but I think we've seen what we need to see. The Eternity is an altered reality that's just tamed down a little bit. It's the general look and essence of the altered, if you will, just fine-tuned. The situation with the altered reality was unfortunate, of course. However, if you still have one, you can throw it in the vast majority of situations. However, again, they aren't available anymore either. But at least we now have a serviceable replacement. We'll finish by comparing it to the Absolute, which is another shiny asymmetric ball in the catalog that just released. The Absolute has similar RG and differential values, however, it's a fair bit higher on the intermediate differential. However, the core design also had preventing locking up in mind, which we feel like it successfully did. The Absolute is strong, but blendy and continuous on the back end. The difference here is that the S84 cover on the Eternity is the strongest one that Global is currently using, while the R2S Deep cover on the Absolute is one of the weakest that Storm is using. We're in the same center on the same lane condition. Proven renovation, as you'll see, the hanging banners are still the same. And the Absolute has the same surface treatment as the Eternity. So let's head to the footage and take a look, starting with a few shots from the Absolute. Before directly comparing them, I think that you can already see quite a bit of familiarity, kind of a surprising amount for me. With the surface adjustment, the Absolute has ended up stronger than expected, while the Eternity has ended up a little tamer and more usable than expected. Now, I'm a tech guy, so I'm going to reinforce that the details matter the majority of the time, but bowling isn't done on paper, so you always need a combination of the details and what your eyes are telling you. Initially, I'm struggling to find differences here. If anything, I think the Eternity is even a little longer and sharper, at least right now. Something to note is that weaker covers generally respond more strongly to surface adjustments. They're competitively strong with more surface, but as they shine up, they fall off more than stronger covers, which don't lose as much traction as they shine up, they just tend to gain shape. Not much difference here again, and what I'm doing is I'm taking a representative shot from the beginning, the middle, and the end of filming. So we can see if and how the reaction changes as the lane transitions or the ball settles in or begins to lane shine. Halfway through, they're still pretty much on top of each other, and the differences are so minimal that even I would be nitpicking if I tried to make a case one way or the other. Finally, here's a couple shots that are a little more telling, or maybe that agree with the specs a little more. The Eternity got stronger as she continued to throw it, or started hooking more at least, while the Absolute settled and tamed down slightly. And with getting both balls out into kind of the out of bounds zone towards the end of filming, the Absolute got back and mixed them up, but the Eternity picked up and almost drove a little too hard. Now, I'm not sure this is wholly representative. I think that they look a little more similar for Angel than they're going to look for most people. I definitely recommend checking out some other reviews to get a better idea. While I'm grateful that you chose my video as one to watch, checking out other reviews is going to give you the best overall idea about what to expect. The final verdict here is that the Eternity is about as good of a matchup for Angel as you could possibly get, despite the few random 8 pins every now and then. It's an incredibly well-balanced combination of length, shape, and control. It's forgiving, it doesn't lock up and straighten out, it blends the lane well. There's just a bunch of positive things to say about this ball. I do have some other comparisons coming. I also drilled myself an Eternity, so I'll have a review of my own coming soon. Check out the description for a link to Bowler's Mart to get one of these ordered, or for any of your other bowling needs. I do earn a 5% commission on all sales through the link, so supporting them supports me. Remember to use my code Rosdahl10 to get 10% off at checkout at CoolWick.com. Be sure to check out my memberships for plenty of early access and members-only content. Thanks to my outstanding members. Thank you for watching, and may the strikes be with you. Yeah.